Hi, everyone. Happy International Women's Month. As I am recording this, I am celebrating and commemorating the achievements and the existence of women around the world. Now, women hold a very special place in my life because I was raised by a single mother. My sister has taken care of me when we were young. And my family, all of us, the three of us, my mother, my sister, have overcome the challenges that we had to go through and won over them. And if it weren't for the achievements and the contributions of my mother and my sister, I wouldn't be here today. And I owe a lot to the perseverance and the achievements and the contributions and all the efforts that women in our society have made and are currently doing to help us progress, to help us develop as a community, as human beings. And women hold a very special place in this world because it's not about, I know sometimes it's not about the gender that defines us, but knowing the historical context and the historical records that women have experienced over the years, it's not right to discredit their experiences. It's not right to erase their struggles in history. And in a patriarchal society, women have always been labeled as second class citizens. But I believe that it is not um, happening these days, although there are still experiences and realities that go on where women are being oppressed. But I believe these days there are women leaders who are opposed to that, who are currently working hand in hand together to combat issues where women are being marginalized, where women are being limited, and where women, their rights are being limited. And I believe that women have far to go and they have reached far despite the fact that society works together for the greater good and women have always been there to sustain us, and we owe a lot to them. So that's why we're celebrating the International Women's Month. And one thing that makes me talk about women is that my short story, my literary piece, which was published by a women centric digital magazine, Marias and Sampaguitas, is finally celebrating its first anniversary this day, March 9th, 2021. And it was published back in 2020, March 9th also. And I remember I first remember submitting it to various literary journals. And I remember getting rejections. Um, I remember getting feedback. And at the end of the day, it's the author's discretion about what to do with the story. So my short story is entitled Memories on the Riverside, and it was published and accepted by Marias and Sampaguitas, which is as I mentioned earlier, women-centric and diverse digital magazine where women work at the forefront and women stories and narratives are being celebrated. One of the founders of Marias and Sampaguitas I interviewed last year, and her name is Kiana Aguila Labra, and she's one of the most talented people I know because she writes poetry, creative nonfiction, and everything that involves literary pieces. And I commend her for taking the initiative to amplify the voices of the BIPOC community, people of color, people like myself, and to amplify the stories and narratives of the LGBTQ plus, because Marias and Sampaguitas are centered on that. And my short story or short fiction, which was published by Marias and Sampaguitas last year and is now currently celebrating its first anniversary this year, is about also a story about a main character who reminisces his experiences with the woman whom he chose to give his heart to. So, Memories on the Riverside, I'll just give a brief context about it. It was written, I think that was way back in 2016 when I first wrote the first draft. One trivia though is that I wrote it as a short film first. I wrote the screenplay and it was intended to be a short film because I had this idea that to feature the my hometown in Cagayan de Oro City, and it takes place in Cagayan de Oro City, which is my hometown, and it features one common landmark, or it's not really a landmark, but it's a common. I wouldn't say it's a tourist destination, but it's a site that is associated or that is commonly associated with my city, Cagayan de Oro, and and it features the river. And it's a short story that I wrote when I was thinking about what are some common sites or common places that are associated with my city, my hometown. Because as a writer, I always want to write something local. I always want to feature where I'm from. So when I was writing Memories on the Riverside, I thought about the river in my hometown in Cagayan de Oro City. And it's a significant place because recently, back in 2011, the river actually overflowed when a tropical storm devastated northern Mindanao. And it was a very tragic event because a lot of lives have been lost and homes were destroyed, families were separated. And it was a devastating tragedy because it was a natural disaster. Yes, it was a flash flood, the river overflowed. Flood occurred in riverside communities. And I'm it's it's quite an emotional take for me on this because even though my family was not directly affected, I feel for those people who have been victimized by the flood. And it was one of those instances when we think that the climate change issue is real and it's happening. And it was that tropical storm in 2011, December 2011. I remember it clearly because I remember waking up to that event. It was actually midnight when it happened, around December 16th to 17th, midnight. And I remember my mother and my sister listening to the news on the radio in our living room. It was black out, it was brown out. The power was out at that time. And I woke up feeling a bit uncomfortable because um, it was hot inside my room. And I got out and went to the living room, the sala. We call it in the Philippines as a sala, in the living room. And I noticed that my mother and my sister were sitting on the couch. They were um, listening to the radio announcer telling and informing the general public that there has been a flash flood going on in Cagayan de Oro City, in my hometown. And from that news, I was able to feel scared. It was scared to realize that with the rain going on outside, the flash flood going on the river, and the river overflowing with water, and the water has become uncontrollable. It's quite fearful to know that there are people getting directly affected. And then the weeks followed, the news followed that there have been missing bodies, missing identities, and it's a tragic event because lives were lost. And for me, as a as a citizen in Cagayan de Oro City, what I can do is just write something that's paying tribute to those people and the families that have been affected. And in 2016, just months after I graduated from college, I've been experimenting on a lot of things, on writing in particular. And I wrote about Memories on the Riverside as a short film. And it was only in 2018 when I decided that um, it would be good to write it as a short story. So I transformed it into a short story. I actually converted it into a short story. I wrote a prose about it. I revised the draft. And I submitted it to a lot of journals back into I started in 2019 and I received an acceptance from Marias and Sampaguitas, a full acceptance from them. And I'm happy that they were able to publish it and to amplify the story that is close to my heart. So I would like to share a presentation or like a slide that I've made to accompany the video that I'm currently presenting now. So it's here. This is how it appeared on the site. Oh, it's actually March 10th, published on March 10th, and it's turning its first anniversary this year. So it's Memories on the Riverside by me. So this was the incident or the tragedy that Memories on the Riverside was based on. Sandong, which is the name of the tropical storm, it was also named as Washi, its international name. And it claimed a lot of lives back in 2011. When it happened, I could hear, people like we could just hear everyone um, reporting it to the news. Various nonprofit organizations have come to aid us. International organizations have come in our city to donate their to provide donations to the people who have been directly affected. And it's an emotional event because lives were lost, families have been separated, homes were destroyed. But then again, I have to raise that from that moment, one learning, one important thing that we could learn from it is that climate change is real and it's affecting all of us. It affected us way back in 2011, and it's turning its 10th anniversary this year in December. And it's not something to celebrate because it claimed a lot of lives, but it's something to remember. And my short story tackled that. It's a story about, so I will go on to that later. And I just want to raise this phrase. Stories matter to remember those we lost. So once again, I would like to share a little bit about my short story, Memories on the Riverside. It's about this main character, Joaquin, who is on the verge of migrating to the United States after his mother accomplished a petition for him to go there. And he was doubtful about it because he originally didn't have plans to live in the States for the rest of his life. He didn't want to leave his grandparents behind, and he actually had to consult from his grandfather. And his grandfather advised him that, the world is out there, it's for yours to claim. And not many people know it, but in the Philippine culture, it's embedded in us to be with our family at all times. Our progress is communal. It involves our family, our relatives, and our friends, even. So, in the Western world, it's about individuality, and there's nothing wrong with that because people in the West have that sense of individualism where they can achieve something great on their own. And that's good on its own. But in the East, I'm not generalizing, but it's basically our collective experience here that success is achieved when we bring together with us. We bring together our family, our friends, our relatives. And that's the case with Joaquin. He didn't see himself wanting to live abroad, having to leave his grandparents behind because he didn't want to, he was raised by his grandparents while his mother was working abroad. And he wanted his mother to come back to, since it was at this time when he finished college already, and he's an engineer and he obtained this license, and so he's basically at this stage in his life where anything can happen. He can forge his own path or follow the path that his um, family has forged for him. And so, with the petition that his mother has given him to go to the States, he has this choice to migrate or to stay with his grandparents. And then his grandfather advised him that the world is out there, it's yours for the taking. Go grab this opportunity because it comes once in a lifetime. But then there's one thing that holds him back. And that is where our story takes place. If you read my story, it's now available on Marias and Sampaguitas. He actually visits one park, which is a true park based in real life in um, Cagayan de Oro City. It's set along our cathedral, one of the oldest church in Cagayan de Oro City. And he visited that park, and then he sat on a bench and remembered someone until that someone came along. And that someone is the woman who won his heart, Rochelle. And if you read the story, you will understand how he has grown to be attached to her and how he could never imagine to leave her behind. It's a story that I enjoyed writing, and it's a story that I enjoyed submitting to literary journals. And it's a story that I'm proud and grateful that Marias and Sampaguitas has accepted and published. And I'm forever happy. My background is actually my backdrop is actually um, a phrase or like an excerpt of that story posted on the Marias and Sampaguitas Instagram page and website. And I'm happy because it's not every day that you get to have your story published and released out there for other readers to read and for other writers to read and to witness. And I'm grateful. So to the folks at Marias and Sampaguitas, led by Kiana Aguila Labra, thank you so much for giving my story a chance to get published on your site, on your digital magazine. And I'm happy, really. Words cannot explain how much I'm proud and grateful that my story has reached an anniversary on your site. And for that, I would like to read an excerpt, the first three paragraphs of Memories on the Riverside, published on Marias and Sampaguitas. Memories on the Riverside. People leave, Joaquin thought as he gazed at the river. His mother's petition had just been approved, and it wouldn't take long before he'd move to the States and reside there for good. But he wished to trade his lifetime just to see Rochelle again. So on a mild Saturday afternoon, he went to the Riverside Park and thought of her. Maintained by the convent of the cathedral behind it, the riverside was carpeted with lush trimmed Bermuda grass. Two golden trumpet trees stood at the opposite distances on each side of the stone bench where he sat. As a warm breeze breathed through the late afternoon, yellow petals fell from their twisted branches, speckling the grass like mosaic on green canvas. The sun glowed faintly in the blue sky, its fading rays glittering over the river's surface. Joaquin knew that this would be a perfect moment for Rochelle. Of all the places she had loved, this was the picture perfect spot. Joaquin remembered the photo he took of her, fished out of his phone from his pocket, and searched the gallery. He found her sitting on the same stone bench, smiling in her white dress, as brown eyes looked straight to the camera. There had been petals on her head like a torn laurel, unintentional accessories swept by the wind from the tree's branches, before he took a snap of the camera. Her hair cascaded like straight black curtains on each side of her face. He remembered her well that afternoon and felt his eyes sting as their conversation came to mind once again. The image was taken in the summer of last year, just months before the incident happened. The Riverside Park may have been a picture perfect spot for her, but for Joaquin, it was a landmark that fortified his fateful decision. So, that's the excerpt of my short story on the Marias and Sampaguitas. Thank you very much, and I'm grateful for all of you. Happy International Women's Month, and may we collectively celebrate and may we collectively pursue the development and progress and success of people we hold dear.